Dr. Jan Abushakra is the co-chair of the Institute for Christian-Muslim Understanding, a very appropriate role for her tonight. With that, please welcome Jan.
I'm very pleased to be here at such a moving event, and I look forward to the comments of our panelists. And I will just very briefly introduce them. The Rabbi Daniel Isaac is the Rabbi of Congregation Nevi Shalom. Reverend Dr. Patricia Ross, the retired senior minister of the First Congregational United Church of Christ, and Mr. Jawad Khan, of the Oregon Islamic Academy Humanities and Language Arts teacher. So, without trying to direct too much what your response is, clearly the theme of the film and this evening is the question of the clash of civilizations or the clash of ignorances. And depending on which side of that issue you come down on, I would appreciate each of you starting just by your immediate response to this film and how it moves you to see our current state of interfaith relations.
That's a very good question. Good evening. At first, I want to apologize and see the clock in the back. Before I answer the question, our high holiday Rosh Hashanah begins this coming Wednesday evening, and always the Saturday before, there's a late service called Slichot, which is going to begin at the Jewish Community Center at 11, and I have to be there for that. But I'm very honored to be here. I fell in love with this film, most of it. It's a wonderful sermon about a world that we would like to create, and it's a world that we all have to be engaged, Muslims, Christians, and Jews, in creating. Because if we leave it to the extremists in any one of our traditions, we are lost. I must say that I don't know, there were a few things that were mentioned in the film that might have been glossed over. They were mentioned. One was the very first professor that you spoke to, who said we ought not to compare the Spain of Muslim Spain. We shouldn't compare it to our contemporary ideas about democracy and tolerance and pluralism, because that really wasn't the situation there. You will remember in the film that actually, I don't know a lot about the Muslim scholar, but understand from the film that he also was forced to leave Spain. But Maimonides left Spain as a very, very young man from North Africa because of intolerance. So there was a great deal within Spain that was very wonderful. The intellectual ferment that took place, poetry and linguistics and philosophy that took place there, but they took place in a context of that's very different from our own, and it's important for us to remember that. If there's any place in the world where we profess and we do as best we can to create a sense of tolerance, it's here in the United States. Here we work together to create that kind of understanding with flaws. But I don't know that exists almost anywhere else in the world. And we have to celebrate what we have here. We have to work harder at it, and we have to make ourselves an example for the rest of the world.
Thank you, and thank you. I too fell in love with the film. I found myself feeling such gratitude for just the beauty of the art and the buildings and the places, all from all of the different traditions that we were talking about. That in itself spoke to me of the reason and the more than the reason, the feeling that we need to be together and we need to share. We did gloss over things, and I was glad we glossed over some of the things about Christianity. We don't come out very well in this film, as we don't come out very well in a lot of these things. But I do want to say about Thomas Aquinas, he did become critical of Maimonides, but he also built a lot of his theology on the major work of Maimonides. And even at the time when the criticism and the oppression started against him, Thomas Aquinas still said, even though we're doing this, and even though we have our reasons for doing it, his words should be treated with respect and consideration. So there are some good things. Since 2001, that's where the film starts, I've been part of a group of women who have Jewish, Muslim, and Christian women who share together. It's very simple, what we do, and yet it's very profound. And I would love to have more people in our world, in our country, all around, to be able to just share with one another. We aren't always going to agree, we're going to disagree, we're going to have different ideas and perspectives, but we can sit together and share, and then we won't demonize each other so much. I want to just end with saying, quoting from Richard Rohr, I'm currently reading a book of his. He will be here with the Ecumenical Ministries of Oregon at the end of October. He's written a book, Falling Upward, about how we mature as we get older, and I'm about older enough so that I can kind of relate to what he's saying about that. But when it comes to religion, this is what he says. Basic religious belief is a vote for some coherence, purpose, benevolence, and direction in the universe. This belief is perhaps the same act of faith as that of Albert Einstein, who said before he discovered his unified field that he assumed just two things: that whatever reality is, it should show itself to be both simple and beautiful. Rohr says, I agree. Faith in any religion is always somehow saying that God is one, God is good. And if so, then all of reality must be simple and beautiful too.
Assalamu alaikum, peace be upon all of you. It was an okay film. One thing I really appreciated before we get into the question asked by Dr. Lachakra was how you bookended the film in the beginning with the scene of you and your family in Central Park. I was in New York City this summer, and as anyone who's ever been there can say that on a summer afternoon or late, early fall afternoon, there's this confluence of religions and ethnicities and languages and different orientations of people. And I thought that was a really good way to begin it. When we see many of the different type of films discussing this type of topic, are often the antithesis of that. You begin with the destruction and mayhem of the buildings falling in 7/11. I'm not honest, but I thought that was a really good way to begin, and the film. I think it set a really good tone for perhaps what you mentioned in the film. There was also my own need to rediscover hope and idealism in a world wounded by an attack on my hometown. And I hope you have rediscovered that hope and idealism after the film, and especially after the events of the Arab Spring and the idealism that was brought forth in Egypt. Talk about the question that Dr. Bashaka asked. Of course it was covered so well, so I'm left with some pickings here. But I think one of the most interesting things about the film was the parallelism between the lives of Ibn Rushd and Maimonides. Both of them were trying to reconcile and harmonize Aristotelian logic with the truths of the Quran, the truths of the Torah, and of course, Thomas Aquinas, of course, with the truths of the Bible. And both of them were challenged by their own communities. Ibn Rushd's books were burned, and he was denounced, and Maimonides' books were burned, he was denounced, and Thomas Aquinas was also denounced at the University of Paris as well for some of his teachings. So it seems like there is this parallelism there. And even though perhaps not everything was perfect, as Professor Menachal mentioned, there was a small, even if it was a small brief period of time, when there was this harmonious relationship. If there is even a small brief of time when it happens, that means it can be done. If you do it one time, if it's there, it exists, then it can be done. And it's not impossible. And I think that's one of the things that I hope people who view this film and people who learn more about the history of Andalusia and the Islamic civilization in the medieval times and what it was about, that they hope that they learn there was this period of time of a harmonious relationship where religions, ethnicities could coexist and create great art, great literature, great theology. And I think it does give hope for everybody. And I think it is something that could rekindle our hopes and idealism.
I want to open it to questions among you and with Jacob Bender. But one of the things that struck me with all of the flaws, some of which were glossed over or just mentioned, I think one of the themes that struck me anyway is that while if we look at the three religions, they had ample opportunity and took advantage of the opportunity to persecute and harass and otherwise disparage people in the other religious traditions. It's also the case if we look at the Jew and the Muslim in this case, and if we include Thomas Aquinas as the Christian, that they were also equally abused and their work and so on by their own religious tradition, their works being burned or disparaged and so on. And I'm wondering if what do we take from this? Are we it seems that there is this minority within each of the traditions that actually has a lot in common in terms of promoting a resurgence of what is the best in all of those traditions. And if you see, if you look at today's world and our world here in Portland, where would these people connect, or how would they connect? On what issues would they be connecting? If we transpose to today.
In answer to your question, in the process of making the film, it was for sure that my hope and faith were restored because of the incredible support and mentoring that I received from people outside my community, from Muslims and Christians in this country and across the world. And also, since making the film, I've had the opportunity to travel to many places across the U.S. And one of the wonderful things that I've discovered that has happened to religious life in the United States since 9/11, in the last decade, was the growth, the organic, authentic growth of small interfaith groups between Jews and Muslims, Muslims and Christians, Jews, Muslims and Christians, across the breadth of this country and in Canada. These organizations, these small groups in small towns and cities were not ordained and pushed by any large religious organization, but came about naturally by the desire of people in communities to know their brothers and sisters outside of their own communities. And I think we should all take heart by that development. And as I've discovered, Portland is another one of these cities where these wonderful ingatherings of people who share certain things within their religious traditions with other religious traditions have come about.
I guess one of the interesting things, based on your question, is how wonderful it was. I was unaware about these ideas that sort of are created, developed, disappear, but they never get lost. And they come back, and they come back, and they come back. Sometimes they're abused. Or used for not the original purpose, but the ideas don't die, and that's what's so vitally important.
I celebrate the ideas that don't disappear. I worry about the fact that there are such strong groups of people who do still continue the divisions and almost take advantage of the divisions and blow them up for political and other kinds of reasons. That worries me a lot. And again, reading Richard Rohr's book talking about maturity, he said that's partly a sign of immaturity. I guess our whole world is suffering from some immaturity, that we are so afraid that someone's going to insult our faith or do something against our faith, that we feel we have to defend it very vigorously. And then the hope is that we can get past that and see that, oh no, we can have our faith and others can have their faith and we can coexist. It doesn't have to be so contentious, but we can't. I don't think we can ignore the fact that right now it is really contentious in our country as well as a lot of other places.
There was a really interesting quote right at the beginning of the film, and it was from your rabbi, and he said, Ronaldo Matalan, and he said, the challenge of relations is how do you make of these texts and make of the human journey something glorious that elevates, that brings humanity to a higher place rather than brings a bloodbath, which is where we seem to be today. You know, I think for Muslims, especially after post 9/11, you know, pre 9/11, there might have been a tendency amongst the majority of different schisms inside of the Muslim community in the United States to be isolationist or to be to concentrate on themselves. But I think the reality after post 9/11 was that we couldn't do that anymore. And so the different institutions that you mentioned, the groups that have been established at ICMU, Institute of Christian Muslim Understanding, and other organizations, I think brings that to the forefront. There's another quote from, I was writing that off.
Were you taking verbatim notes, or did you have a script there?
From Professor Menopause, and she said something really interesting. It was right after what the rabbi mentioned about the United States version of democracy being different from what was in Averroes. But she mentioned that someone like Bin Laden and his Weltanschauung, his worldview, when he called it the tragedy of Al-Andalus, couldn't understand the beauty of it. And I think the modern day for us movement, which I think is giving us hope, is that people are looking at something like Andalus as something good. As the Reverend says, of course it's going to be good for the people that take an opposite view. And that's the challenge. If it wasn't that, then of course it would be kumbaya, peace for everyone. We would be here, the film would be made, so what? But that's not the fact. But I think there is progress being made towards this, and it gives me hope.
Comments among yourselves. I feel like I'm behind Marionette, please, whatever questions you want to bring up, ask it.
I think one of the great challenges is the fact that monotheism that we all practice, monotheism is at its very base intolerant. Monotheism proposes that I have the right answer. And if your answer is different from mine, you're wrong. And that has been the motivation for much of our history, much of our Western history, and it motivates many people still to this day. There is only one right answer, and that's something that we have to fight against because in order to create our ever smaller world that's becoming smaller and smaller, that is intolerable. It was perhaps a way to live when we lived in separate communities, when we lived in separate areas of the world. But the world just doesn't exist that way anymore. And therefore, that kind of view of the world is not a world that we can live in any longer.
And to quote Professor Kellner, in the film The Israeli Professor, who made the only recorded remark in world history comparing Maimonides to Star Trek. Some of you got that. Where he said one of the motifs of Maimonides was that the truth can be found in many different communities, and that's why we find so many references in Maimonides' writings, not only to Aristotle and Plato, but to other Muslim philosophers such as Ibn Sina, Avicenna, Al-Farabi, Ibn Battah. And so there is a constant going outside of one's own community to bring in to Judaism sources which were outside the tradition to make them part of the tradition.
Would you like
I just wanted to say that, Rabbi, I thought you were wrong, and I want to disagree. But I think as you had two incredible poems in Maimonides and Ibn Rushd coming to their own truths about their own religions, and works that were studied long after they were done. That time had passed, and the works had gone on. They were coming to their separate truths, but at the same time, they were able to live in a harmonious place and establish their own special truths, their own individual truths relating to Judaism or Islam. And so I think that's something to look at. But many things that you say, Rabbi, are true, and there is a paradox that lies in with each one of the faiths, the monotheistic faiths, is that how to reconcile the fact that I have the path to truth, and then at the same time say, even though that I may not necessarily agree with your path to truth or exactly, but we can still coexist and allow you to search your own path to truth.
Yes, would you like to ask a question? Maybe stand up so that everybody can hear you.
Well, my question is really simple. You mentioned it took 9 years to make this film, and I was wondering what caused it to take 9 years.
I was wondering that also. Well, I've been blessed with many things in my life. A trust fund wasn't one of them. And documentary filmmaking, as any sort of filmmaking, is a time-consuming but extensive undertaking. And so starting from zero, it took many years to reach the $800,000 that it took to make the film, and the budget really should have been about twice that. Many people worked for very much substandard fees that they would have normally worked at on a more Hollywood or professional or industrial type of level. And there was a point in 2005 where, and I started again in 2002, where we hadn't raised much money. And I, together with my wife and 4-year-old daughter at that point, were ready to pull the plug. And then, alhamdulillah, the funding began to come down like manna. And we received many large grants again from Jews, Christians, and Muslims around the country and around the world. And that, but it took a long time. It was a long journey. But it happened.
Yes, another question over there. Yes.
Okay, so why did you choose to have the movie as narration, not the actors? Why did you choose to have actors playing the role of this person or that person?
One, because I'm stylistically, I'm drawn to documentary film making, not feature film making. Second of all, if I had been drawn to feature film making with actors, the necessity of the budget would have been 20 times what went into this one, because I would have needed to pay the actors to create sets, to get a lot of costumes, and a cheap, inexpensive feature film in Hollywood costs $25 million. So if you extrapolate 9 years took to raise $800,000, how long did it take? So the little math that I knew thought that was not such a good direction to them. But also I wanted to bring in I made a decision quite early that the film could not just stay in the Middle Ages, which a historical film like Yusuf Shaheen's Destiny or Kingdom of Heaven, of a budget of $250 million by Richard Scott, great battle scenes, not that portrait of Saladin, little certain. But for me, the necessity of launching this journey was to bridge the gap between the past and the present, and I thought that could only be done in a documentary.
Okay, we're getting close to the 10 o'clock hour, which we promised that we would end, but maybe we could take maybe 2 quick other questions. The man there in the back. And then so, quick. Yeah.
My question is to the whole panel. Why the scholars of these 3 novel religions cannot come with some idea, although they have perhaps the good finance and they have the most population of the world, cannot come with a definite idea to reject the theory of Charles Darwin, which that is denying the base of all these religions, and still is getting progress. They have a course in the university, they have a course in high schools, and then they are young people gradually growing up in this way that these are a joke. Charles Darwin has proved that they came from different ways. How come there is no way to prove that that theory is not practical?
I didn't.
He's asking evolution. What evolution? Why can't one of these are overcome?
What?
Why can't one of these or the 3 faiths have a good argument for evolution?
Against evolution.
Refute Darwinism.
Darwinism.
Because I think, first of all, I know more about Maimonides than I do about any of the others. He was a rationalist. He was not a person who was setting up a controversy between religion and science. He was actually trying to blend the sense of rationalism with religion. And I think the challenge for all of us is to blend, is to find a way to blend the best of scientific research and our religious beliefs. I don't know that my objective is, as a religious leader, to find a way to rebut Darwin. It's not my
We'll take one last question from a woman.
Only women here, yes. Gail?
As the film went along, and I'm sure that you had a very specific outline of where you were going and in what order and that kind of thing, was there anything that happened that really impacted you that you didn't expect, or was there something that made you maybe add something to it that you hadn't planned on, or just surprises that you found along the way that kind of changed the course?
Yes. The film changed shortly after we began production because I originally envisioned the film as a standard historical documentary with an off-camera narrator, like many of the documentaries one sees on PBS. And at a certain point, my editor and Spanish co-producer said, it's not working. You need a sort of hook to bring the audience along into the sometimes obscure philosophy and philosophical arguments of these two people. And so I said, no, that's interesting, you know, what was the hook that you have in mind? And my editor said, you. And, you know, my first reaction, you know, putting myself in the film, I was sort of aghast, not wanting to become a Jewish, thinner version of Michael Moore. But I think in the end, it helped the film along. And because, as I said earlier, the process of making the film began to mirror what happened at its best in Andalusia and Al-Andalus and Cordoba. The coming together of different Jewish, Muslim, and Christian funding sources, and then this multi-faith, multicultural production team that I was blessed to meet along the way, made it seem that my journey of discovery, in a way, paralleled the dilemmas of Averroes and Maimonides to balance reason and revelation. And I think one of the amazing things was, you know, all filmmakers and paint, you know, when is it going to be over? You know, what's your concluding, you know, statement? And I found that amazing quote towards the end of the production period by Maimonides, who said at the end of his life that blessed with a child as he was rather late in his life, as I am blessed as well. And he said, only two things give him solace as he comes to the end of his life, which was his ability to rationally understand the natural world and God's creations, and the joy he receives from his child, who became his predecessor, his successor as the leader of the Jewish community in Cairo. And finding that statement at the end of the production period was one of the great surprises of these 9 years, and seemed to make it all seem worthwhile. One final remark, just it's a question of tachlis, which is Jewish expression meaning practicalities. If any of you choose to buy the film, which I hope you do, these are home editions. So if you want to show it in public gatherings, please, you need to contact me.
Can you
Yes, now it's being, shortly, the two very large Christian and Muslim organizations will be sending out announcements to, and that's ISNA, the Islamic Society of North America, which is the largest Muslim umbrella group in the country, and the National Council of Churches of Christ, USA, which is a large multi-denominational Christian organization. And the two of them together will be publicizing the film to literally hundreds of mosques and churches across the country. But you can also get the film by contacting me if you can't buy it tonight, invite me to your community, set up film screens. So this is already my 50th screening since last year, so it is taking off, and through your good efforts, it can be seen more, but also through your efforts in promoting the values that we can take out of the film. That also is, I see from the evidence of all of you here tonight, that this is taking place in Portland as it is in dozens of communities around the country. To that, we should all be thankful.